Welcome to the Pre-K for Me Unit 6 overview, Things That Grow. This is presented by the Early Learning team. Here you see the Early Learning vision and mission. You can pause to review those. Unit 6, Things That Grow. Our goals for the unit overview are to learn the overall unit concepts, to connect concepts to read aloud centers and small groups, and to gain tips to support instruction and the flow of the unit. As part of this overview, you will see images from pre-K classrooms right here in Maine. Things that grow, the big ideas. Children will explore life cycles and learn how plants and animals grow and develop. Children will study, observe, plant, and nurture seeds, as well as research animals and gardens around the world. Children will examine their own growth and development from babies to children. And the unit concepts? Living things need food, water, and proper conditions to survive and thrive. Living things are part of interdependent systems. People impact their environment in different ways, and living things grow and have life cycles. The core read aloud books for Unit 6. The first book that we introduce is Zinnia's Flower Garden. In this story, Zinnia plants a flower garden, and we see all the work that needs to be done for a garden. You also see what she does with her flowers and how she prepares for her garden for the next year. This will be an introduction to planting seeds for the students. The second story introduced is The Ugly Vegetables. The main characters in this story, a mother and a daughter, are preparing and planting a garden in the backyard. As they prepare, plant, and tend to their garden, the little girl notices other neighbors have gardens too. She also notices that there are differences between her garden and the neighbors and wonders why. As the gardens start to grow, we see how she feels about the vegetables, which she calls ugly, and we see how her feelings change after the vegetables are ready to be picked and her mother cooks with them. The third story we introduce is Community Soup. This story is about a little girl in Africa. Her goats follow her to school one day and eat vegetables in the community garden. The students are making a soup that day, and you will see how Keone, the little girl, contributes to the soup with the help of her goats. The fourth story introduced is Make Way for Ducklings. Mr. and Mrs. Mallard are trying to find a place to build their nest that will be safe to hatch their ducklings. We hear about reasons that some places are not safe for them to build their nest. Students will hear the characteristics that make some places safe and others not for building the nest for their eggs. They will learn about molting and hear about the adventures as Mrs. Mallard and the ducklings travel to meet Mr. Mallard at the pond in the park. The last core read aloud book is Bigger. Note that you will need to print this book. This is about a boy growing up and getting bigger. You will discuss measuring tools that the family uses to see how much the boy grows, as well as compare what older children can do that babies cannot. Here's an image of a read aloud lesson plan. As a reminder, the read aloud plans highlight key vocabulary. They include teacher notes that will help you support vocabulary, language, and concept development, and they go through all 4 individual reads. And we'll move into the different centers for Unit 6. Centers is an opportunity where you can help students make connections back to core read aloud books, as well as to some Let's Find Out About It lessons and small group activities. A view of a centers lesson plan, again, that highlights vocabulary, supports teachers in introducing the centers, as well as gives suggestions for while you're engaging with students during centers, with some guided questions and discussion ideas and provocations to extend the learning. Another way that we support language in centers is with the center language support guides, which are available for all centers and can be posted in the center area as helpful tools for educators as well as anybody who may be visiting your classroom or substitutes. The block center in Unit 6 contains building a garden, building Make Way for Ducklings, and building bridges. Building a garden is in week 1 and connects to Zinnia's flower garden and the ugly vegetables. This center is actually planned for 2 weeks. You will introduce this center by showing different types of gardens and discussing community gardens, crops, gardening tools, and signs in gardens. Encourage students to brainstorm and plan their garden and how they will build it. They can create tools and signs with beautiful stuff. And remember, there is a resource of examples of gardens. And here you just see more images from building a garden center. And notice that there are combinations of flowers and vegetable gardens. Next, we have building Make Way for Ducklings. This will be introduced in week 3. Students will be building the setting of Make Way for Ducklings. Use a combination of blocks and beautiful stuff for this center. This is similar to building habitats in previous units. Discuss the different settings in the book and encourage students to build the different settings. They can even use materials to create the ducks. Encourage students to use what they have built to act out and retell the story. The last block center is building bridges. You will introduce this in week 4, making connections to Make Way for Ducklings. Again, use a combination of blocks and beautiful stuff for this center. Point out the different bridges in the story, as well as use the resources to show students various bridges. Encourage students to plan their structures before they build, and encourage them to test their stability and strength of their bridges by putting animals, peoples, cars, etc. on the bridges. Dramatization in Unit 6. We have a garden center, making soup, and kindergarten. The garden center, you will make connections to Zinnia's flower garden and the ugly vegetables. Students will create a garden center with flowers, plants, tools, etc., and they can take on the roles of customer and garden center cashier or clerk. Use the resources to show students images of garden centers and flower shops. Encourage students to create labels for their items in the garden center. This center pairs well with the block center of building a garden. Encourage students in the shop to sell crops to those building gardens. And remember, don't forget to print the resource. Here are more images of students in the garden center. And next we have making soup, which connects to ugly vegetables and community soup. In both stories, the characters make soup using vegetables from their gardens. When introducing the center, model mixing the ingredients, stirring them in the pot, and serving with a ladle. Ask students about soups they like and compare those to the soups in the stories and that they are making in their center. Consider extending this center by asking students to create their own recipes. You could even consider making a classroom soup. And remember, there is a resource to print out as a recipe, and you might consider adding recipe books or cards that have other soup recipes. The last dramatic play center is kindergarten, which connects to the story bigger. Explain to students that after pre-K or preschool, they will go to kindergarten. Students will create their own kindergarten setting and can take turns with the roles of teachers and students. Connect this center to the research on kindergarten that occurs in the library center. And the art studio and easel in Unit 6, we have above and below the garden soil, Chinese calligraphy, community garden, creating cars, and making nests. There are many activities in the art studio area. You'll see a sampling of those activities. We don't have images of all of them, such as for creating cars. Above and below garden soil. This is introduced in week 1. You will make connections to Zinnia's flower garden and ugly vegetables. Compare what it looks like under the soil for root vegetables and for other vegetables and flowers. Encourage students to label their pictures. You could consider having students create a collaborative collage of above and below the soil. And remember to use resources available to help demonstrate what grows above and below. Chinese calligraphy. This connects to ugly vegetables. In the story, the mom made signs for the garden written in Chinese calligraphy. Encourage students to compare letters in Chinese calligraphy to the way that we make letters. Don't forget to print out the resource with many examples of alphabets around the world. Students could try to write their name or other familiar words in a variety of ways. Community garden. This occurs in week 2, connecting to the story Community Soup, as well as Zinnia's flower garden and ugly vegetables. Students work collaboratively to plan and create a community garden. Encourage students to brainstorm what will go into the different plots of their garden. In making nests. In week 3, you will introduce making nests, making connections to make way for ducklings. You will also connect this to the book Chickens Aren't the Only Ones from the Let's Find Out About It lessons. Students will use a variety of beautiful stuff to create their own nests. Encourage them to use information from Let's Find Out About It, as well as their research in the library centers, to help them when designing and creating their nests. What animal are they building a nest for? Have students describe their nests and compare it to those in the stories. Library in Unit 6. Researching gardens. What parts of the plant are we eating? Researching oviparous animals and researching kindergarten. While we don't have images of students researching for this unit, we do have an image of one of the resources which is provided to support the students in the research. The one shown here is from What Part of the Plant Are We Eating? Discovery in Unit 6, comparing capacity, preparing soil, and building nests. We will look at images for comparing capacity and preparing the soil. We don't have images for building nests in the Discovery Center. However, it is similar to building nests in other centers, and you will use beautiful stuff. Comparing capacities is introduced in the first week of Unit 6, connecting to Zinnia's flower garden. Students will use containers of variety of sizes to compare capacity. Include funnels and different types of scoops. Encourage students to predict which containers will hold more or less, and then check their results. Preparing soil. This is introduced in week 2, connecting to Zinnia's flower garden and ugly vegetables. In both stories, the characters prepare the soil for their gardens. Discuss why gardeners prepare soil and what tools they use to do so. Manipulatives in Unit 6, sorting beans, make way for ducklings, story sequencing, and oviparous animal letter match. We have images of sorting beans here for you, and unfortunately we do not have images of some of the other centers for manipulatives for this unit. Writing and drawing in Unit 6. We have garden signs and diagrams. The 2 writing centers are garden signs and diagrams. Garden signs connects to both Zinnia's flower garden and ugly vegetables. In both stories, signs were used in the gardens. Ask students why the signs are important. Encourage students to use the garden signs that they create in the block or the dramatization centers. Diagrams connects to Zinnia's flower garden. In the story, Zinnia drew a diagram in her journal. Discuss the parts of a diagram with students, such as the lines and the labels, and encourage students to label their diagram. Outdoor learning and nature extensions in Unit 6. Gardening. Will it grow? Animal life cycles, macro invertebrates, tree life cycle, flower parts. There are also other extensions and books suggested. Consider adding materials from nature and natural loose parts into your block center and other centers to encourage students to collaborate to build with and create with those items. Small groups in Unit 6, seed experiment, planting seeds, vegetable memory, bird feeders, rhyming games, dear pre-K letters, and story sequencing. As a reminder, you would typically have 3 groups per day, an independent group activity, a group which is more low to middle teacher support, and then a group which is more mid to high support. Students would go to one group and then go to a different group the following day. Lesson plan, similar to all the other lesson plans we saw, this highlights key vocabulary and goes over the procedure to introduce and engage with students during the group. Planting seeds. This is a small group that is introduced in week 1 and also carries over into week 2 when students will observe their seeds with magnifying glasses. Let's find out about it. We have what does a seed need, garden design, caring for gardens, Chinese calligraphy, community gardens, desert gardens, edible eggs, oviparous animals, wheels and tires, bridges, life cycle drawings, and look at pre-K now. As a reminder, let's find out about it. In Let's Find Out About It, students will learn more information about concepts that are introduced in Read Aloud. Some of these activities include a nonfiction book and resources that you would need to print ahead of time. And these learning activities and experiences can be applied to various activities in centers and small groups and throughout your day. Here's a look at the lesson plan for a Let's Find Out About It activity. And as a reminder, these contain the vocabulary as well as guiding questions to support teachers in building language and concept development skills. And observing oviparous animals was one of the Let's Find Out About It activities. And here you see students doing just that. Swiplin, songs, wordplay, letters, and numbers. Here's an image of the different poems and songs and clues that you will use for the activities throughout Swiplin, throughout the unit. You will revisit songs and poems and games from previous units, as well as introduce new ones. Any new Swiplin activities will, of course, have materials that you would need to prep. And then some tips and things to think about for Unit 6. Consider how you can involve families and the community. For example, could you invite people in to share their experiences with gardening and or farming? Plant a variety of seeds for students to observe the growth. Consider if there's an opportunity for a community garden at your school. Keep up your supply of beautiful stuff. Students will be using this to build nests and in many center activities. And our helpful links, we have the direct link to Unit 6. We have the Pre-K for Me link and the DOE Early Learning page. For any questions regarding Pre-K for Me, you can contact Marcy Whitcomb at that email listed. And here are the ways that you can find DOE online.